Hey there, folks. Hope you're doing well today. It took 87 days for Charlie Kirk's legacy to be destroyed since his death. And it wasn't his racist white nationalist videos that did it. It was his own side.
Oh, great. I see we're watching more talking leopard cartoons.
Sam, give me a break. This channel was way ahead of its time. Also, you heard the rumors about Sector 6-7. Turns out talking leopards might actually be a thing.
Listen, Nico, I get it. This was the content you were watching 20 years ago when ICE deported you from the United States at only the age of 8, the only country you've ever known.
Yeah, you would think being born in the United States would mean something, but because my parents were immigrants,
And maybe that's the reason you like to hide in your rocket ship in space.
Hey, Sam, watch it. You're my AI pilot, not my AI therapist.
Nico, I have an idea. What if we pick up where your favorite channel left off? What if we started making videos and reacting to people putting ignorance on display and showing them why it's so foolish?
I don't know. You really think we can?
Come on, aren't you even watching that channel you're such a fan of? That was their whole message. That anyone can make change happen. You just gotta try.
Okay, I'm on board. But how do we get the content back in time?
I heard there's a mad scientist with access to the internet in the year 2026. I guess she has some old router or something. Either way, let's make some content and then we can go track her down.
I always like the content about the racist, stupid people. Maybe we should start there.
Great idea.
But I want to make the content look cool. How are we going to do that?
Check this out.
Oh, yeah, that is pretty cool.
Let's dive in.
Racism is a sticky topic and one I've been forced to grapple with my entire life. As a child, I was taught it was both morally wrong and intellectually baseless. As a young man meeting people from diverse backgrounds, I was confronted with the reality of racial differences. I delved into topics like crime statistics, IQ variations, stereotype validity, and the impact of diversity on cultural and social cohesion. As a grown man, I found Jesus, who blessed me with moral clarity. And now, as I enter middle age, I can confidently look anyone in the eye and say with the courage of my convictions that I, Lyndon Perry, am a racist.
Wow, is that what it was like in 2026? People wrote essays justifying how they were racist?
Yep, it was a thing. People recorded themselves saying this stupid shit and put it on YouTube. Not only that, it was very common for them to use religion or point to scripture to try to justify morally corrupt behavior.
Okay, this should be the part where he leads with the strongest argument, right?
Let's start with a hypothetical. Suppose you had the choice between living on an island with 100 white people or an island with 100 black people. Got your answer? Well, if it's anything other than, why would I care, LOL, just flip a coin, then congratulations, you are racist. Don't believe me? Let's take a look at the dictionary, which defines racism as a person who believes one race is better than another is racist. Racists discriminate against other races. Now, unless you also need me to define the words better or discriminate for you, then I assume we're on the same page here. But you don't like that, do you? You don't want to be racist. Well, don't worry, you're not alone. A similar question was recently posed on X, the Everything app, by Elijah Schaefer. He asked if not wanting to live around blacks is racist, with 87.8% of respondents voting no, not racist. Presumably, some percentage of the people voting would, in fact, prefer not to live around black people, so why the disconnect? In a word, stigma.
So let me get this straight. His strongest argument was a loaded question, a hypothetical.
Correct. He creates this setup or trap where it forces you to make a racial choice where race is the only variable. But in real life, people choose where to live based on so many other things like jobs, family, culture, cost, climate, safety, language. This strips away all context. so that race itself becomes a deciding factor.
And yeah, it really feels like once you start arguing about definitions, you're just looking for a way to avoid self-reflection. But it also feels like his argument only works by removing context and ignoring motives and redefining racism so no one ever has to feel responsible for it.
Yeah, Nico, you're spot on. This hypothetical is so artificial and manipulative, all the while motive is ignored because it breaks the argument. Not to mention, the poll data he uses is completely ideologically skewed. His entire point is to detach racial bias from moral accountability.
If you chose to live on White Island, it's because you believe it would be a better place to live. You don't have to feel bad about that. You're right. But we play these word games because there is a profound stigma around racism. It's not seen as a personal preference, nor as an objective assessment of reality based on empirical evidence and pattern recognition, nor as an innate aspect of human nature. Rather, it is seen as a moral failing, a sin, something that makes you a bad person.
So, was it common in that time for people like this guy, racist, to work with AI to write these kind of things?
Yeah, we could definitely see it's the work of AI. He's really trying to just redefine racism as something reasonable and almost scientific, as he says. It's just a personal preference based on observing patterns, part of human nature. And so, in his framing, racism isn't about hatred or cruelty. It's about seeing reality clearly and acting accordingly.
You're totally right, Sam. He's setting up his kind of moral escape. If racism is natural and logical, then feeling guilt about it makes no sense. And he's making this case that shame becomes a trick used by society to silence racism and its stigma. But racism isn't stigmatized because it's unpopular. It's stigmatized because it has predictable harmful outcomes: discrimination, exclusion, violence, and state-backed oppression. Society stigmatizes behaviors that reliably cause harm. Calling that a word game ignores why stigma exists in the first place.
But it gets better. Check this out. He was on the No Jumper podcast debating some guy named Dark Brandon, and I think this is where he kind of came out of the closet as a racist.
We should confront this head on. When I was describing this debate, which was supposed to be with somebody else at first, when I was describing it on a previous episode of No Jumper, which I don't know if you actually caught wind of it, but I essentially referred to you as being sort of outwardly, openly racist.
Yes.
Does that seem like a true statement, or would you like to add caveats?
No, I say that. I'm racist. I think a lot of people don't necessarily know what it means to be racist. Like, I have a black person over for dinner, you know what I mean? It's not like hateful. It's not like I can't be around them or anything like that. Basically, white people need more racial consciousness. They need to start acting like a group because all the other races do that already. And so it's just kind of to our detriment that we're the only ones playing this like blank slate egalitarianism game, and where no one's on a team. We're all Team America or whatever people want to say, but all the other races are kind of like, no, we're a team. And you see a lot of that in what's built up to this. Like the Shiloh Hendrix thing was kind of one of the catalysts for this debate.
So it sounds like he's trying to make an argument that white people need more racial consciousness. But when he talks about what the culture adds to society, the only thing he points to is Shiloh Hendrix, which was some chick that called a young autistic boy a bunch of racist names. Like, they're not talking about food or music or cultural identity that helps society grow as a whole. It's always some horrible behavior.
Yeah, he went out for tacos right after this interview, and the outro song for his channel is hip-hop, but let's just keep going.
The term racism was originally coined in the late 1800s in France by nationalists like Joseph Arthur de Gobineau and Gaston Marie, who used it in a self-affirmative way without any negative connotation to describe their own ideological beliefs. Gobineau believed that race determines the fate of civilizations. He divided humanity into three primary races: whites or Aryans, yellows, and blacks, with Aryans as the superior creative force. Civilizational decline, he argued, resulted from racial mixing or miscegenation, which diluted Aryan vitality. It wasn't until 1935 that a new book titled Racism was published, which cast the ideology in a derogatory light.
Wait, so here he's trying to make an argument that originally the word wasn't that bad, so, oh boy.
Again, it doesn't matter how the word came about. What matters is the predictable, harmful outcomes: discrimination, exclusion, violence, and even state-backed oppression. But wait, there's more. He's got more examples to make his case. Let's see what he's got.
Apartheid South Africa had a horrible reputation for being the world's most racist regime in the late 1900s. The country was ruled over completely by white colonialists living in wealthy and pleasant enclaves, while the majority of the black population lived in squalid shanty towns. This drone photo from 2024 shows that not much has changed. There are two ways to view a photo like this. In the mind of a racist like myself, the takeaway is clear. Whites work hard to build beautiful, safe societies for living and raising families. By contrast, equality-minded folks see only exploitation. They believe whites can't create the prosperous community shown on the right side of the photo without help, even though countless historical examples prove otherwise.
Hold on. Let me get this straight. So the one example he uses is talking about white prosperity in South Africa, which was built on, I don't know, colonization, land seizure, forced labor, and political exclusion of the black majority. The infrastructure that whites built was financed by wealth they monopolized while legally barring others from participation.
But this is the common narrative we see. They want to leave out so much so that they can try to make their arguments. But everybody knows judging post-apartheid outcomes without acknowledging the starting point is ridiculous.
Not to mention he ends on this idea that there's countless other historical examples, but he doesn't name one, and the one example he does use, again, was built on colonization and law-based exclusion.
So to summarize, the black population of South Africa profited greatly from the white ruling class, which they rebelled against anyway, only to fail to make any material improvements to people's living conditions in 30-plus years, despite receiving billions in foreign aid. And meanwhile, a small group of determined white people moved to the desert and built their own safe, thriving, and friendly community from the ground up. Surely there's some sort of lesson in all of that.
Yeah, so we continue to see him push this narrative of really leaving out the majority of the variables, right? In post-apartheid South Africa, they inherited one of the most unequal economies on earth, with capital, land, and industry already locked into white hands. Corruption and mismanagement exist, but that doesn't retroactively justify apartheid or racial hierarchy. Economic failure does not prove racial incapacity. It proves that political freedom without economic restructuring leaves inequality intact, something that this guy wants.
In October of 2024, Zoran Mamdani announced that he would be running for mayor of New York City. New York is very diverse, with only 30% of the population being non-Hispanic white, according to the most recent census. Mamdani, an Indian Muslim born in Uganda, ran on a platform that explicitly targeted white people for taxation.
We went on your website and realized there's a policy proposal that says your plan, and I'm going to quote it for folks, is to shift the tax burden from overtaxed homeowners in the outer boroughs to more expensive homes in richer and whiter neighborhoods. Explain why you are bringing race into your tax proposal.
That is just a description of what we see right now. It's not driven by race. It's more of an assessment of what neighborhoods are being undertaxed versus overtaxed. We've seen time and again that this is a property tax system that is inequitable. It's one that actually Eric Adams ran on, saying that he would change in the first 100 days. He's since sought to defend it and lost at every juncture in court.
And I understand you're saying we're simply describing the types of neighborhoods that would see these increase in taxes, and yet by invoking race, do you run the risk of potentially alienating key constituents?
I think I'm just naming things as they are. And ultimately, the thing that motivates me in this is to create a system of fairness. It is not to work backwards from a racial assessment of neighborhoods or our city. Rather, it's to ensure that we actually have an equal playing field. And right now, what we see with the property tax system is one that is overtaxing a number of New Yorkers and undertaxing others, and an inability of political will to resolve that.
Wow, so again, it really feels like he's not honestly looking at these ideas. He's really trying to make a case here that politics is driven by racial revenge rather than material conditions, when in reality, people vote for redistributive policies when inequality is extreme, regardless of race. White voters do the same in heavily white regions. Framing redistribution as anti-white is a tactic to protect wealth concentration. Just as Zoran said, property tax reform is based on property value disparities, not racial targeting. Wealthier neighborhoods happen to be whiter because of historic housing discrimination, not because the policy is racial. Naming demographic outcomes is not the same as designing racial punishment. He confuses descriptive language with intent.
And really, this all falls into some classic elite panic propaganda used throughout history. From Jim Crow to apartheid to anti-union movements, democracy threatens entrenched privilege, not race. When the wealthy fear losing power, they reframe equality as persecution.
The theology of racism is too deep and complicated a topic to cover in depth for this essay. For my part, I will simply share a couple of my favorite biblical examples of God demonstrating racism. First, we have Deuteronomy 28. Foreigners who live in your land will gain more and more power while you gradually lose yours. They will have money to lend you, but you will have none to lend them. In the end, they will be your rulers. This chapter deals with the consequences of disobedience to God. God promises to curse disbelievers by making them subservient to foreigners. How could this possibly be a curse to begin with if God did not mean for me to prefer my own kind?
And here we see him continue to cherry-pick these examples. Biblical nations here refers to tribes and political entities, not modern racial categories. Scripture also condemns oppression of foreigners repeatedly.
In conclusion, since racism is not a sin or moral failing but a natural part of God's design, and since white people are threatened with retribution and oppression when they give up power, like in South Africa, or when they become a minority, like in New York, the obvious course for white people is to tribe up in the furtherance of their own security and group interests. Or, put another way, we must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children.
Wow, it really feels like he's using God here when he's talking about a conflict between races being God's design as a way to justify his prejudice and racism, not theology. It really kind of turns human violence into divine intent.
Correct, Nico. And that's what we've seen historically. It was used to justify the Crusades, slavery, and ethnic cleansing. Declaring injustice inevitable conveniently absolves people of responsibility to try to do better.
Yeah, I feel like when he's talking about white people needing to tribe up to secure their future, it's treating people as guilty by default. Other groups are a threat because of who they are. And he's making this claim that individuals should be judged as part of a group, not as people. And that punishes innocent people. Most people aren't trying to harm anyone. But racial survival thinking assumes that everyone in the out-group is a potential enemy, and everyone in the in-group must be protected at their expense. That means innocent people lose trust, rights, or opportunities simply because of their race.
That's very astute, Mika. Not only that, it copies the logic he says he fears. He claims to fear being judged or targeted by being white, but tribing up does the exact same thing in reverse. He's judging others by race, assuming hostile intent, and acting defensively before harm exists. He's not rejecting that logic, he's using it.
Yeah, and maybe that was the problem in the United States in that time. It turns politics into survival mode, where equality looked like weakness and disagreement looks like danger.
That's correct, Nika. It really breaks down democracy. Democracy only works if people accept losing sometimes, if laws are applied equally, and no group is treated as a permanent enemy. Racial survival thinking, on the other hand, rejects all that. It says if we don't win, we're doomed. And that mindset alone makes fair elections impossible to accept. But we could look to history to show where this ends. When societies adopt racial survival politics, the result is never safety. It instead leads to repression, the loss of rights, and even violence justified as defense. When Trump promised security, he delivered fear instead.
Yeah, I guess you're right. In the end, this isn't really about race. It's about accountability and fear, and what people do when they're scared. Tribe up sounds like protection, but it's really just panic dressed up as wisdom. It asks us to judge people before we know them and treat neighbors like enemies. When everything gets reduced to race, fear starts making decisions. People start blaming others for their own problems instead of taking accountability. They stop seeing others as individuals and start seeing threats everywhere. That doesn't lead to safety. It leads to walls, suspicion, and a loss of trust. History shows this thinking never protects anyone for long. A future built on fear always costs more than it promises.
Well, not bad, kid, for your first piece of content. Now, let's go find that mad scientist. I hear she hangs out at a bar called Frank's.
In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom. And it's our maximum day.